I feel like this game got overlooked by many, and maybe that it's because Lords of the Fallen had mixed reception when it came out, the developer's previous game. Or maybe that it's because The Surge is a Dark Souls type game and we already had a great one come out this year in the form of Neo. Or maybe it was something else. But either way, I do think that this is a title worth checking out and maybe a tad underrated. Let's start with the story. The game does start with a good promise for an interesting story. I enjoyed the intro cutscene and the beginning bits of the narrative. The story gets really confusing after that and not well done as you keep going through the game. While I wasn't crazy about the story doesn't really get in the way of enjoying the game. The story does provide some purpose as to why you're doing what you're doing. You play as Warren, who is a wheelchair-bound person, and they put a lot of detail in this beginning section of the game, and really this starts to kind of create the potential for a really good personal story, at least in my eyes. This was kind of how I was seeing it, is, you know, you have this individual who doesn't have the use of their legs, and then quickly following the intro, you get your exosuit, and then now you can walk. I mean, for crying out loud, the guy doesn't even jump for joy and is like, did you just see that? Look, I can walk, I can use my legs. Like, he should be excited, ecstatic. I mean, I would just say, even if he's been in the wheelchair for his whole life or just for a little bit, if you can walk after that, I mean, like, I'd be jumping for joy. I'd be happy. Just something like that would be great. And that really is something with Warren throughout the whole game, is it just kind of creates this little bit of a disconnect, and the story doesn't really live up to its full potential that it could be, is he just doesn't react. He kind of feels like a robot that you're continually controlling throughout the game. Like I said, doesn't hurt the experience really, it's more something I observed, because really the meat of this game is in the gameplay. What I do think is a strength for this game is the atmosphere. In many ways, the game kind of reminded me a bit of Dead Space, mainly from the visuals and the atmosphere. The game does a good job of putting you in environments where you feel alone, and anyone you run into is kind of crazy or they want to kill you. So there's times within the environment where it feels very claustrophobic with the hallways that you're going through. You're running through kind of these vents that interconnect these rooms, and sometimes you have enemies in there that will kind of just pigeonhole you a bit and try to attack you. And sometimes they caught me off guard, and really it was some of these instances and some of the visual aesthetics that really reminded me of Dead Space. Overall, I did enjoy the environments in the game. I do think more variety in those areas would have helped to improve the visual variety of the game so that some parts don't look so samey, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The combat will be similar to anyone who has played Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Neo, anything like that. The Surge has a really cool energy system to it that adds another layer to the combat. So as you hit enemies, you build up energy, and this fills up your energy bar, and then you can use that energy for health injections, buffs to your character. You can use your little robot buddy to either attack an enemy or help you out by giving you a shield. The trick is with this energy is that it doesn't stay. So as you build it up, you know, you have all these abilities that you can use. But if you don't use the energy or hit another enemy, it slowly goes away. And what's also neat is you can use energy to take down enemies in a really cool cinematic fashion, because that's awesome. These takedowns are really sweet because basically you rip off a body part that you have selected. So this game isn't just cool to watch with these takedowns, but it's neat in which the takedowns play into the loot of the game. So as you're attacking an enemy, you can select a particular body part to attack. So you'll do more energy to a section of the body that is glowing in blue because that doesn't have armor on it. But if you select an orange like yellow area of their body, that signifies that there's armor on that piece. So you'll do a little bit less damage, but you want to make sure to take down one of those body parts, because when you rip that body part off, you have a chance of getting the schematic for that armor or for that weapon. So you then increase your arsenal or increase your armory. And I really like this. So it's like, oh man, I'm missing the headpiece to this armor set. So you got to go find the guy with that armor and knock off his head. And then you're like, oh, my head. And then you can go put it on. I like that. It just adds another cool layer to it for like looting and finding new armor sets. Now, the environments are really cool too, and this does play into the loot of the game. Is what's neat here is it's really worth exploring the environment. Really look behind everything. There's a lot of really hidden items and all that type of stuff throughout the environment that will really help you out. Also, there's audio logs, and what I like here, it does provide some nice context to what's going on. Like I said, the story isn't particularly strong, but the audio logs really do feed into the good atmosphere that I was talking about before. I do really enjoy the interconnected nature of the levels. This is pretty much a staple of this kind of style of level design from these types of games. And it's always satisfying to then find a door that provides a checkpoint back, or a shortcut back to your med bay, so you can get your health and stuff like that, and then start off of that shortcut instead of having to go through the whole area again. The game has a few boss fights, and some of the boss fights are really good, while others are okay. I do think the last boss fight in the game is visually cool, but I do think that it could have been a more difficult to it, something else to it to kind of make it a bit more challenging, because other previous fights in the game were pretty tough. And you get to the last boss fight and it's like, oh, it looks pretty, but it goes down pretty easily, or I got lucky. Maybe it's really hard and I just, I caught the AI at a bad time. I played the game on the PS4 and the game had solid stability throughout. The frame rate was consistent and good throughout, and I didn't experience any crashes for the game. And there's a reason why I'm saying this, is because this is the same developer that made Lords of the Fallen. And when I played that game on the PS4, I had many instances of the game crashing on me, which created a really frustrating gaming experience for me while I played Lords of the Fallen. And I read too that I wasn't the only one who was experiencing that with Lords of the Fallen, and what I like is that it seems like the developers kind of took what they did with Lords of the Fallen and really tried to improve on themselves. And I really want to give them credit for that. I like that there were no crashes on the PS4. Now let's get into some areas that could use some improvements with the Surge. Overall, I was fine with the combat controls, but there are instances where the game is not responsive to your actions. So I'll try and select a health injector because I don't want to die in the game. I'm getting hit, I have a bunch of energy, I want to get my health back. So I'll hit the injector button, but the health won't start going. So I have to hit the thing again, and then I notice, oh, okay, the health is now regenerating. I had to monitor this a lot because sometimes the injector would work when I hit it, and other times it would work when I hit it 2 times. So I pretty much just mashed on the injector button whenever I wanted to get my health back and I had energy. Some boss fights have instances of a bad camera angle, or the boss fights go on for just a little bit too long. One boss is where you fight a normal enemy with more health, and as you damage him, he will run away, and then you have to re-beat the first boss again. So this happens a few times during the fight where, you hit him a bunch, he runs away, you fight a robot. Hit him a bunch, runs away, fight a robot. Now, I would have been fine if this was a boss fight in a game with more boss fights, but this game only has a few boss fights, and I really think more variety in the boss fights would have been better for the game. While I enjoy the atmosphere and going through the environments, there are instances of the game where you have to backtrack to then get to other areas within the game that open up for you. So you're returning back to many of these internal areas, and a lot of the areas in this building look very similar to each other. Now, getting lost and having fun like that is fine when you're exploring, but when you're trying to progress and go to the next area and that's your objective, it gets really annoying because sometimes you're like, this room kind of looks like that room and I don't know where I am. So maybe a map would have helped this game, or a waypoint system that only shows you where you can go into the next load area. So you have these brief load screens when you get into the other areas. It would have been nice if you had something that just popped up. It was like, oh, go here to go to this facility and then go here to go to that facility. Because I don't want a persistent objective marker that's there like you see in Call of Duty where it's like, follow him. Don't do something like that. But I do think something like that, just giving you some indication of, oh, here's a load area, there's a load area, so that you can kind of know where you're going, especially considering that there's backtracking and that the environments do look very similar. Now, like I said before, the combat is fun and enjoyable, and I enjoyed fighting enemies, but the combat system is way better when you're fighting enemies one-on-one. When you're fighting multiple enemies, it can be really hard, especially with the targeting system. And some enemies use some really cheap attacks where they'll knock you to the ground, and then right when you're trying to get away, you'll have another enemy there beating you down, knocking you down again. So there are some instances of that just provide some annoyances. Now overall, I did enjoy my time with the Surge. I spent around 40 hours playing this game. The exploration, the environments, I really enjoyed. I like going through trying to find different items. For the most part, I really enjoyed the combat system, and yeah, the game isn't perfect, but I do feel like it's worth a look and worth time playing this game. I'm really happy that the studio is kind of moving in the right direction. It looks like they learned from some of their mistakes in Lords of the Fallen, and you know what? I hope they keep improving for their next game, so I really look forward to what they're making next. And I want to say thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.